Okay, so one person draws it and the other one retraces it, is what I'm hearing.
You're a dick.
Hey, what's going on? This is Raiderlance and
IceyEyedGnome.
Thank you for joining us today. We have been working on stuff behind the scenes. That's why we're not getting as much content out, but we got some new plans. I'll do an announcement video later so you can kind of understand what's going on. Housekeeping, please like, share, subscribe. We need all the help you can get. We really appreciate what you guys have been doing for us. And today what we're going to talk about is something close and dear to my heart. And the reason why IEG is joining on me is he knows more about it than I do. and I'll explain why. All right, so for everybody who doesn't know what Planet Studio pins are, back in the 90s, when you would walk into a comic book store, you would look on one side and there'd be all the newly released comics for that month. And you look on the right side, there'd always be a cashier and then a plastic spindle. And that was a spindle that contained all the enamel pins made by Planet Studios. And so fortunately, I have a buddy. His name is Adam Konkle, and he has a couple of those. I also have some pictures of those spindles on the website, basically dedicated to Planet Studios. So the website was made by Luke Evans. Thank you. I've taken a lot of material from this. I would be lost without him. Real quick, Adam Konkle, he has a store. He has a massive pin collection. If you want it or need it, hit him up. It is custombeadart@hotmail.com. Once again, it's custombeadart@hotmail.com. I am not kidding when I say this guy has tens of thousands of pins. I've seen his basement. It's glorious and horrifying at the same time. So when I think of Marvel pins, I always think of the old, what they call now, vintage pins. And they are all the old Planet Studios. Now they have tons, you know, especially since Disney took over. You got the D23 movement. You have all those pins. So I collected those pins when I was younger, and I had a small one. And then during COVID, I started getting back into it. And I found eBay, and now I'm in debt, quite frankly. So I keep on showing IEG all my new pins, and he's like, oh, yeah, that was this artist. I didn't know that. I didn't collect those comics. Oh, I got these new pins. Oh, yeah, those are really cool. That's actually was a poster or a card, not the... Anyway, so I'm bringing him in so that he can tell me about my pins. You cool with that, brother?
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to kind of, you know, a little bit of the comic, a little bit of back history, and a little bit justification why I buy these goddamn enamel pins. All right, so what do I mean by enamel pins? They are essentially male brooches that you would have bought on QVC. If you're a comic book fan. Let me give you a little bit of backstory. They made these pins, and I'm going to go off my outline a little bit, so sorry if I'm not looking straight in the camera. They were made between 1987 and 1996, and they were hard enamel pins. So the company was created by Elizabeth Berry, Libby Saul, and it was a small family cottage industry run in a private house by husband and wife. This was a mom and pop shop, and they were not the first company to make Marvel. There was a brand before that called ENT. Then there's a French brand called Saggy that made some bootleg ones. But basically, the one that came out in mass that you saw in those comic book stores, those were Planet Studios. So Planet Studios was doing well, but around 1996, comic book market kind of crashed. Comic book stores started going out of business. Marvel wanted a little higher percentage of those pins. So Planet Studios basically was sold or kind of fizzled out. And this happened around 2007. All right, now how were these pins made? What are we talking about? All right, so there's hard enamel, there's soft enamel. It's the kind of, you stick in your hat, and it has that little button fly clasp on the back of it, or you can put it on your lapel. They're called lapel pins, and they're typically around 1 inch to maybe 1.5. They got a little bit bigger. You can usually tell them apart from these other pins because, of course, the date and the back stamp. They have a waffle design on the back, and they were made by either zinc or copper, brass. They were, what do they call that? Where it's dipped in gold or gold painted, right? So it's not precious metal, but they use higher quality metals than the soft enamel are made now. And so nowadays you got a boatload of different type of soft enamels. I think they call photo etching. You do still get hard enamels, but the pins nowadays are way more complicated. And you hear about all these people like the D23 conferences or Disney where this just sounds copious amounts of these pins. I don't really get into that. I might have like a total of 5 of them in my collection. I just mainly collect these old vintage ones because they remind me of my childhood where my mom would buy one for me if I was a good kid every time we would go. And now my collection.
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever. That's why they were so sentimental to me, because it was.
That's why you have so few oddity. Of them. They're just.
Yeah. So now I got a couple of display cases of them, and I'll showcase a little bit of them. Okay, so the reason why we're going to showcase the pins we're going to showcase today, they are all pertaining to the Age of Apocalypse. So we think this is going to be a great way to transition to IEG's soon coming in the future a video on Age Apocalypse storyline and a lot of, what happened in there. All right, IEG. So what'd you think about the 4 pins that I showed you? Have you seen the different artwork from them before? And I'll start playing some B-roll video to show them off.
Yeah, so 2 of the pins that you sent me that you have for the Age of Apocalypse series are from actually the same cover. And it's from the cover of X-Men #1 Alpha, I believe, which is considered largely to be the beginning of the Apocalypse series for X-Men. Even though that's not the widely sought after book, it's still very valuable. And you can find copies selling on eBay for several hundreds of dollars, $400 or $500.
Jesus.
But it's considered to be the beginning of the Age of Apocalypse. So that is a very popular comic, and it showcases some of the more common mutants and some of the big players in the Age of Apocalypse series, like Legion, Sabretooth, Wolverine, and then, of course, like Cable and Bishop and so on, some of those big players. But it's a great comic. I reread it recently after you said that we were going to be talking about this topic. It is a great comic. But the more popular comics that it's connected to are from the Uncanny X-Men series,
right?
That came sometime later. But if you really dig into the Age of Apocalypse series, there's actually a great number of comics that are connected to it. I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 or 40 different comics that kind of tie into that original storyline, and they run from 1995 all the way up until the most recent release, which was 2022, I believe. More common was the 2014 series.
So let me interrupt and ask you: I've never read Age of Apocalypse, unfortunately. Was it an alternate timeline? Was it after the normal timeline? Follow the mutants and all that other stuff that came later.
So time travel was involved in the comics. But originally, yeah. So we had like Cable and,
sure,
whatever. But so time travel was involved. But the cool thing about it was originally when it was written, this all took place in Earth 616. But because the Age of Apocalypse like literally destroyed the mutants and they killed Professor X and like just all this crazy stuff happens, right? Like half the mutants are killed. Half the world is blown up. Like, because they did so much damage to Earth 616, they later retconned it so that it happened. This all took place supposedly on a different Earth. So originally it was like in the main universe, the primary universe, and then they were like, "Oh, we fucked up," and then they moved it to a completely different one later in the comics, or retconned it. But
of course they did. And folks, that's why I hate time travel, because they get to redo everything and fix all the oops in the storyline writing. Okay, so I have a couple follow-up questions specifically because of my only introduction to the Age of Apocalypse is through these pins. So the first pin that we're going to feature is just Sabretooth by himself. Now, The Sabretooth I know is a villainous, murderous foe of Wolverine. What is his role in the Age of Apocalypse storyline?
So he kind of struggles with his identity, but quite literally, it's just a handful of characters that support Apocalypse, and then others that are controlled by fear. Right, so they fear him, so they work for him, but they really don't want to. So there's a lot of
Got it.
Animosity and that kind of stuff. So it's just every man for himself sort of deal. And Sabretooth has always been kind of a survivor in the comic. So Apocalypse has kind of a similar but more sinister version of Magneto's plan, which is to reshape the world in his image.
Okay.
But he wants mutants to be slaves. He doesn't. His outlook is not like freedom. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, speaking about Apocalypse, the second pin we're going to be featuring actually isn't a Planet Studios pin. Now, remember how I said Planet Studios was making them, from 86 to, what was it, like 96 generally? Let me go back to my notes so I can say it properly. Yeah, for about 86 to 96. Well, they had a pin scheduled, slated for Apocalypse. It was developed, but it was never produced. And I'm going to show on the list from the website proof that there was supposed to be Apocalypse pin. So I don't have one in my collection, but there is this other company called Mondo. I believe the artist is Tom Whalen, and I don't completely understand what Mondo is, but they do a lot of art, for various different companies. You got Marvel, you just got all these different type of movies, memorabilia.
To touch base on what you had mentioned about the Mondo pins, that Tom Whalen had said had done some work in. Tom Whalen is kind of like an eccentric artist. He has a very unique style, and you can spot his artwork from like a mile away. He's known mostly for his typography and that unique art style, but he's worked for everyone, DC, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Disney.
Yeah.
He's done posters and these Mondo pins, but he has a really cool website, and it's called strongstuff.net. So you can just go there and browse some of his artwork. Some of it's really, really good.
That's awesome. So I guess they got a license from Marvel, and they created their line of Mondo pins, and now they're on their second version of them, where they're side profiles. So this is a soft enamel pin. I think it's 1.5, and it's a little bit larger in relation to the Planet Studio pins. It's a great headshot of Apocalypse, which I think is fantastic. But, it's not action-based or taken from a comic book. But next to it is another one of Sabretooth, but this time it was with a character I had no familiarity with it, and his name is WildChild. And it also explained why the hell he has all those chains around his wrist. I was like, is he a prisoner or something? But I guess these chains are to keep WildChild in check. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, so WildChild was like kind of a very crazed character. He does play like a pretty important role in some of these comics and some other comics throughout the mid 90s. His character really never took off as far as like popularity is concerned. So we've seen less and less of him over the years, but he was featured really heavily in the Age of Apocalypse. And yeah, those chains, I'm not going to ruin the story, but the chains were there for a reason. And in my opinion, they should have just left him on.
Why was he buddies with Sabretooth?
Oh, he wasn't buddies.
Ooh.
He was like rescued, I think. So WildChild has had numerous abilities that kind of continued to grow over the years. But he was mostly known for like super speed and his feral look, his feral appearance, and his ability to like attack, right? So he was injected with DNA from an assassin known as Wire. And that kind of progressed his mutation even further to the point where they had to chain him up in a camp, which, funny enough, the camp's name was Neverland.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
That didn't age well.
No.
All right. Next topic. So this is one I do take issue with, and it is a pen of Wolverine with one hand. Now, back in my day, Magneto screwed with Wolverine and ripped off all his adamantium, and he only had bone claws, and he broke the bone claws. My brain could wrap my head around that. But this one-handed Wolverine in Age of Apocalypse, like, what the hell happened to his healing factor there? And how did they cut through it if he still has his adamantium? So through this whole series, Wolverine is one-handed.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, well, let's get to happier stuff. Who was the artist who did this cover of Age of Apocalypse Alpha?
So you'll have to forgive me because he is Portuguese, and so I can't pronounce his last name very well. So he signs his art Joe Made.
Okay.
And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his last name because I will butcher it.
Got it.
But he does the principal artwork, and then it's also inked by another Marvel artist who is Tim Townsend, who's like a very respected and very good artist in his own right. Most people think
that's amazing.
Inkers are just, they trace the lines or whatever, but he produces some really incredible artwork.
All right, so I got to be honest here, guys. After we stop recording, I have some questions, so I'm going to insert that so it makes more sense and you guys can get the information. I didn't understand why there was two artists involved in these pins, and I was trying to figure out who drew what. And so, IG, can you explain why I'm a moron? What is the role of these two gentlemen?
So one is a primary artist, and then the other is the inker, is what they call it. And the primary artist is responsible for drawing the primary artwork, defining the shapes and the characters and the style. And then the inker goes back over and cleans up all the lines, decides like what's in the forefront, what's behind, what should be shadows, what's not. They just clean up a lot of the work.
Okay. What does cleanup mean? Just take some stuff out or get rid of messes? I'm still not quite sure what cleaning up the lines means.
Yeah, so the principal artist sketches, so oftentimes the lines aren't perfectly clean. They're not really smooth. So they kind of draw back over and clean those lines up, make them real smooth, real nice and steady lines. Okay,
so one person draws it and the other one retraces it, is what I'm hearing.
You're a dick.
I'm sorry, I had to. This is the way my brain processes it. Okay, so there's an artist and a tracer. Got it. And then who colors?
I don't want to have this conversation anymore.
Okay, we'll end it there and get back to the original conversation.
And first, I want to kind of touch base on Tim Townsend, just because there's a lot about Joe Made. So Tim Townsend has worked for several different publishers. He's worked for Marvel, Top Cow, Image Comics, DC Comics, and he's worked on a number of different like very popular titles like The Flash and Superman. And in Marvel, he produced mostly inks or artwork for the X-Men and Spider-Man comics. He's also credited on Marvel's website for creating the full creation or co-creation of Peter Parker from Earth 29955. Which that stuff gets confusing, but that version of Peter Parker is known as Spider Swan, which is very similar to Peter Porker.
Oh, Jesus.
But it's just a more realistic looking pig. Like think of like a fat pig wearing like a toddler's Spider-Man costume. Because that's exactly what it looks like.
It gets worse with the more you describe it.
Oh, his arch nemesis is
please don't.
Craven the Hunt Pig.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So that's kind of what he's known for. But he is a really incredible artist. And I think on his Instagram, he says something about the fact that he's a Marvel artist by day and a wine drinker by night.
You'd have to be to come up with that stupid Spider-Man story.
So Joe Made is the primary artist for 3 of these Planet Studio pins. And he's done a lot of work for Marvel Comics, but like the other individual that we talked about, Tim Townsend, he has kind of jumped around a little bit and worked for several different publishers. But another cool thing about this guy is he's also a game designer. So I don't know if you've ever played it, but like I really enjoyed it. Darksiders 1 and 2. He played a
I've
heavy
heard
part
of
in
it,
the
but I
production.
have not played it.
Yeah. So he played like a heavy part in the production of those games, developed all the primary art for it, the character concepts and some of the background scenery, assisted with some of the storylines and that kind of stuff. And he was also working at the time for THQ, that game developer, on a video game for Warhammer 40K, which is wildly popular. I've never played it, but at the time THQ was going through some issues, and they had to file for bankruptcy. So that project was scrapped. But he's also developed his own video games for an independent comic that he created. His Battle Chasers, which ran from 1997 until 2001. But people were really unhappy with the series because he was only releasing like 2 or 3 comics a year.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, in 2001, it ended with Battle Chasers number 9 that kind of left you on a cliffhanger. And he kept saying that he was going to produce this last comic, but it's actually going to be released this month on June 16th, or next month rather, on June 16th, to finish out the series. So Battle Chasers number 10 is going to be released there.
Now, let me ask you, I know I'm biased. I grew up with, the famous Jim Lee drawing X-Men. I gotta say, Age of Apocalypse seems a lot like it compared to some of the other artist renditions of X-Men. Would you agree from an artistic perspective, or am I can't tell the difference and I can't tell the nuance between the two?
You mean the artwork is heavily influenced by the work of Jim Lee?
Correct.
Okay, so yes, I would agree with you. Actually, Joe Made worked at Image Comics or Wildstorm imprint.
Sure.
And that was founded by Jim Lee. So I'm sure that he did have some heavily influenced comic styles. However, most of his artwork is more Japanese manga influenced. And you can really see that. Yeah, you can really see that if you go back through all the covers and look at the amount of detail, and especially the female character lines, because it's very pronounced. So the jaw shapes are more commonly pointed in Japanese manga. You can see that in a lot of his cover art here. So Joe Made has been influenced more by Japanese manga than anything. I'm sure that he has been influenced by other artists that had worked for or do work for Marvel as well. But
correct me if I'm wrong, you're not the biggest fan of that type of artwork?
I dislike anime. I love animation. I'm not a big fan of anime.
So anime and manga, but those are kind of two different. They're similar, but different art styles. Is that correct?
They are too similar, but yes, they are.
Too similar.
They're different.
Too similar for your liking?
Yeah. I appreciate the art, but it's not my favorite. I enjoy classic American animation. Yeah.
Yet another topic we will not see eye to eye on. All right.
I'm sorry.
Well,
it's okay
everybody.
To be wrong for you.
Dick. This is our introduction to some of these pins. This is more of an introduction to IEG's soon coming video on Age of Apocalypse with highly edited. Make sure you check that out. And then I will, after this, be recording another episode, just giving you an update what our plans are in the future. We got a clear roadmap now. We're going to move forward. Things are going to start picking up and gaining momentum. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening. And if you are willing to listen, we are willing to talk. Catch you later.